Okay, today we're going to talk about the cell cycle. The cell cycle is what happens in a cell during its lifetime. Most of the time, a cell is in the phase called interphase. So if I were to break this up, all of this in here is when the cell is in interphase. And interphase just simply means in between. So this little piece of the pie down here is when the cell is actually going through division. Now, what happens when a cell divides is you get two identical daughter cells. So you're going to end up with two daughter cells that are identical. And each of these are going to go into interphase. So interphase is broken up into three different parts. Each of these parts is responsible for a different part of the cell growth and preparing to divide. The first one is called G1, and G stands for growth. So the cell is growing right now. It's going through its regular metabolic processes. But in addition to that, it's also creating some of the necessary organelles that it's going to need in order to divide into two. So it's making organelles. Organelles like extra mitochondria and Golgi bodies, all those things that are necessary for a cell to each have its own copy when it replicates. At the end of G1, there's a checkpoint. And that checkpoint checks to see if enough organelles have been made and enough growth has occurred during this time. If the cell meets those requirements, it moves into the S phase. S stands for synthesis, and what this means is it's going to make a copy of its DNA. And this is an important phase because what it's doing is making an identical copy of the cell's DNA. We have to have an identical copy if we want to have two identical daughter cells at the end of division. Again, there is a checkpoint after the S phase where the cell checks. Did we make two complete and correct copies of the DNA? If again the cell passes the test, it moves into G2, which is the final phase of interphase. Again, we have growth. And this time we are creating all the enzymes and necessary material that we need in order for the cell to go through the process of division. Finally, we have our last checkpoint where the cell checks to make sure that enough growth has happened, that the DNA has been copied, that everything is in its correct place, then the cell can enter division. Regular body cells are called somatic cells. And these are the cells that are going to go through this type of division. In this case, we want identical cells. And cells do this, or our bodies do this, to replace cells that have maybe need repair or to continue to grow. So most of our cells, like muscle cells, skin cells, go through this type of division. And this type of division is called mitosis. And we'll talk about in the next video the steps of mitosis. But when a cell goes through those steps of mitosis, again, you end up with two identical daughter cells. Because you duplicated the DNA here and did enough growing here and here, there's enough material to make two identical cells.